Hello again, folks. Steve Grizzetti, co-founder of MoviePix.com and author of the MoviePix.com Guide to CyberLink PowerDirector Ultimate. And here we are in part 2 of our 2-part series on how to create the zoom effect or the Brady Bunch grid effect or a video collage in which various videos interact with each other. In part 1, we placed the videos on the timeline, we resized them, and we cropped them so that they would all look nice in our little arrangement here. And that could be good enough, but we want to add a little more excitement to it by adding some animation to what's going on screen. Now you could do this in a number of ways. Naturally, you could just go over here to the transitions room and just grab one of the transitions and drag them on any of the clips. But we're going to manually create one. Let me go back here to the media room. We're going to manually create one. I'm going to do that by taking the playhead here and moving it to the beginning of the very first clip. So I'm just going to drag the playhead over here, and I'm going to zoom in on the timeline. And I can do that by dragging across the ticker here at the top of the timeline, or I could just go down here to the plus button and zoom in the lower left-hand corner. There we go. I just want to zoom in far enough on the clip so that I can see where the audio begins. So this is where she begins singing right here. I'm going to widen that out a little bit. So this is where she begins singing, and this is where she appears. So we've got just a short period in between when she appears on screen and when she sings, and that's where we're going to create our animated transition. So to do that, I'm going to place the playhead right here just before the singing starts, and then I'm going to double click on the clip to open up the picture-in-picture designer, the PIP designer. You can see that the playhead on the PIP designer is in just a fraction of a second, so it synchronizes with the position of the playhead here on the timeline itself. And I'm going to place some keyframes. So just by clicking on position, scale, I could even do opacity. I'm creating keyframes that define this particular position and this particular size. And then to create the animation, what I'm going to do is slide this playhead over to the left to the very beginning of the clip. And then I'm going to create some new keyframes, and they'll be created automatically when I just change these numbers here. So for scale, right now it's at 55%, but we're going to change that to 0. And when I change width to 0, it also changes height to essentially 0. Anyway, it's invisible. And there's a new keyframe. I don't know if you can see it there on the timeline, new little red keyframe. It's red because the playhead's on top of it now. But now I have a keyframe at the very beginning of the clip that is 0% scale. And then right next to it, I have a second keyframe where we're at our 55%. And you can see as I scrub through here, as I move the playhead, we now have a zoom in. So this video is going to zoom in at the beginning, and then she'll sing. And at the end, we'll create the opposite. We'll zoom out at the end. Now we could do something a little more interesting if we wanted. So I'm just going to click on select previous keyframe. That'll jump the playhead here to the very first keyframe. And instead of setting it for 0% scale, I'm going to set it for 1 or 100% scale. And then move her, there she is, into the video frame. And you notice, by the way, the height is different than the width here, even though maintain aspect ratio has been selected. Don't let that concern you. That has to do with the fact that we cropped the video clip. But in any event, what we could do is we could just slide these here, and we could begin with her at full screen, and then when she sings, she zooms down to that corner. That's kind of cool, right? So we have that option of creating that transition. But just to simplify things, let's make it a 0. So it begins with her not on the scene, and then she zooms in here in a fraction of a second. She starts singing, and then we'll go to the end of the clip. So I click OK here, and let me just zoom out from the timeline a little bit. There's the end of the clip, and we'll zoom in on that. This is where she stops singing. So we'll do the same thing with the playhead in that position. Double click to open up the PIP designer. We'll create new keyframes for position, scale, and opacity. There they are over on the right. Now these keyframes are identical to the keyframes prior to them. In other words, she's going to stay at 55% the whole way through here, and then I'll move the playhead off to the very end of the clip, set this to 0, and now she zooms out. So, right, she zooms in at the beginning, she sings her little song, and then at the end, she zooms out. Click OK. Now, we're going to do that to every one of these clips. As you can see, it doesn't take too long to do that, but it adds a real kind of sense of the dynamic to the video and gives us something a little more interesting than just having the video or the person pop in and sing. It's up to you, just a way to enhance it, but the results sort of speak for themselves.
Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Row, row. So
as each person comes in, or as each video comes in, it kind of zooms in, takes its place on the screen, and you could add any animation you wanted to make it even more interesting. But that's the effect. The Zoom call effect, or the Brady Bunch grid effect, or the video collage, whatever you want to call it. That's how it's created. Now, you want to know more about this program and how to create effects like this, you'll want to check out the many tips and tutorials we have at moviepix.com if you want to know everything about it. The moviepix.com guide to CyberLink PowerDirector Ultimate. I wrote these books, and they're available on Amazon.com. I'm Steve Grizzetti. Hope to see you again soon.